For 30 years, my entire world revolved around my son, Oliver. I had dedicated every breath, every heartbeat, every ounce of strength I possessed to giving him a future filled with possibilities. In my mind, this was the essence of motherhood, selflessly pouring my heart into raising him, always putting him first. From the moment he was born, I made sacrifices that most people wouldn't even think twice about. I worked tirelessly, often without sleep, knowing that every hour I spent at work was one less I could spend with him. But it was a sacrifice I was willing to make. I nursed him through feverish nights and heartbreaks, comforting him when the world seemed too big and too harsh for his tender heart. I put him through school, watching him grow and learn, hoping that with every lesson he absorbed, he would inch closer to a life I could never have dreamed for myself. And yet, through it all, I felt that my role as his mother was to sacrifice, not just for him, but for his future. I gave up my own dreams, pushed aside the woman I once hoped to become, and in some ways, even let go of the woman I had once been. My own life paused on a shelf, while his life sped ahead, moving forward with every step he took. I didn't regret a single moment of it. The one thing that never wavered in my heart was my belief in the future I was building for him. I stayed in a marriage that was no longer healthy out of loyalty to him. I accepted the hardships and the loneliness, hoping one day he would understand. But that day never came. Instead, it was a day that would forever change both of us. I remember the moment clearly. It's burned into my memory, seared like a hot iron against my soul. I came home that day, exhausted from another round of rejections and disappointments. I had just lost my job, a position I had held with pride for many years. It was a blow I hadn't seen coming, but there was little time to grieve, to let the weight of it sink in. The bills still needed to be paid. Oliver was still counting on me. And so when I walked into that house, I had no idea what would happen next. I thought I was prepared. I thought I had raised him to be understanding, to see the sacrifices I had made. But when I told him with a heavy heart that I had lost my job, his response was something I never could have anticipated. "Good," he said coldly, his eyes hardening. "You're a burden, a parasite. Maybe it's time you move out." My world collapsed around me in that moment. The words hit me like a slap, stinging with the sharpness of betrayal. The child I had given everything to, the boy I had raised with my blood, sweat, and tears, he saw me as nothing more than a burden. For years, I had stood by him, holding him up when he faltered, fighting every battle for him. And yet here he was, casting me aside as though I were nothing. I had always known that parenting wasn't about expecting gratitude. It was about giving unconditionally. But what I hadn't prepared for was the coldness of that rejection. The bitterness that rose in me was not just for the words, but for the realization that all the sacrifices I had made seemed to mean nothing to him now. I had spent my life giving him everything, and yet he saw me as someone to discard. In that moment, something inside, I had forgotten the woman I was before motherhood, the woman I could still be if I allowed myself the chance to rise up and reclaim what was mine. I could no longer be the mother who just took it, who just swallowed her pride and allowed herself to be trampled on. I could no longer be the woman who put everyone else first at the cost of her own well-being. It was time for me to stand up. It was time for me to make my own future, regardless of what anyone, even my own son, thought of me. I thought I had nothing left to lose, but that was when I discovered just how wrong I was. What Oliver didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that my former employer, who had respected me for all those years, had left me a fortune when he passed away. It was a gift he had quietly arranged, one that had been hidden away, waiting for the moment when I would need it most. I had thought that I had lost everything, my job, my purpose, my sense of self. But the truth was, I had something much more valuable than money or status. I had my dignity, and I had the strength to rebuild. Now, it was time for Oliver to realize something he hadn't grasped yet. The price of betraying me, of casting me aside, was far higher than he could ever imagine. It wasn't just about money. It was about respect, about understanding the sacrifices I had made and realizing that there were consequences to taking someone for granted. I wasn't the woman he thought I was. I was more, and I would show him just how much. I would no longer be a pawn in his life, no longer the one who silently suffered. From that moment on, everything would change. The sacrifices I made for him were over. Now, it was time for me to claim my own life back. I had barely stepped through the door when I told Oliver that I wouldn't be working for Gloria anymore. It wasn't the grandest of announcements, but it was something I had been carrying around for a while. The words were still fresh on my lips when I saw his face shift. The joy I'd felt walking through the door evaporated in an instant. His eyes darkened, and before I could explain myself, his voice cut through the air, sharp and accusatory. "Why would you suddenly quit? That job paid $7,500 a month. What are you planning to do now? Sit around and freeload?" His words struck like a slap to my face, and I felt a rush of hurt and frustration. Did he really think I'd left that job to just lounge around? I had come home to make life easier for all of us, to offer my support, and yet his anger was so raw, so unfiltered, that I couldn't help but feel the sting. The tiny shred of happiness I'd felt returning home, the relief of being in familiar surroundings, vanished completely. The house, which used to be my refuge, now felt cold and distant. Oliver's tone, cutting through the air, left no room for explanation. I could have snapped back, retaliated in the same sharp manner, but I didn't. I knew better. Oliver had been under a lot of pressure lately, and I understood that. He was trying to juggle his career, the complexities of his marriage to Claire, and his insecurities about his place in her world. His wife, Claire, came from an affluent family, a family that looked down on us, always acting as if we didn't measure up. Her father, a powerful high-ranking official, never failed to remind Oliver of his lack of pedigree, while her mother, Helen, a stern and ever-critical university professor, seemed to take pleasure in belittling him. I had always hoped that, one day, Oliver would find some sense of respect from them, especially if they ever found out about the $8 million Gloria left me. I imagined that, once they learned of the inheritance, they might finally start treating him differently. Maybe then they'd see him as worthy of their respect. I didn't bring up the money, though. Not yet. I wasn't ready. Instead, I steered the conversation elsewhere, hoping to calm the storm that had started to gather in Oliver's eyes. "I know Claire plans to get pregnant soon," I said carefully, trying to find the right words. "I thought I'd come home early to help out, support her during the pregnancy, and help with the recovery afterward. I could also lend a hand with the baby." Claire's expression hardened almost immediately. It was as if I had said something utterly unforgivable. Her lips curled into a thin, almost scornful line. "Postpartum care needs a professional, not someone who used to work as a housekeeper," she said, her words as cold as ice. Before I could respond, Helen, Claire's mother, chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. "Taking care of a newborn isn't just about diapers and bottles. You need training. This is something only professionals can handle." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, each one aimed at my past, at everything I had done to try and help. They saw me as nothing more than the help, someone who didn't belong in their world. But what hurt the most was that Oliver, my own husband, didn't stand up for me. He just stood there silent, watching it unfold, his eyes clouded with something I couldn't quite place, shame, perhaps, or guilt. I thought of the life I had left behind when I moved in with them, of the sacrifices I had made, thinking that family would be my refuge. But instead, it felt more like a cage. The walls were closing in on me, and every word from Claire and Helen only seemed to tighten those bars. I had hoped that coming home would bring us closer together, that I could be there for Claire, help with the transition to motherhood, but instead, I was being pushed further away. I could have walked away, left them all behind, and never looked back, but something in me resisted. There was still love for Oliver, a lingering hope that things could change, that he might finally see me for who I was and not just for what I had been. But as I stood there, feeling the weight of their words pressing down on me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer the person they wanted me to be. Perhaps I never was. The room was thick with tension. the kind of weight that hangs in the air and crushes your chest. There, in front of me, stood Helen and Claire, their smiles sharp and polished, with a kind that concealed layers of disdain and superiority. They were perfectly synchronized, every glance exchanged, every word they spoke choreographed. It was as if they had rehearsed this scene for days, preparing themselves to deliver the final blow. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't just a conversation. It was a performance, one where I was the unwilling spectator in the theater of their cruelty. I stood there, frozen, as their words washed over me like a cold, unforgiving wave. It was clear from the way they spoke that my feelings didn't matter. Their dismissal of me was absolute, their judgment swift and harsh. Well, if everything's arranged, I won't get in the way. I'll leave the baby care to you, I said, forcing a smile that tasted bitter on my lips. I could feel my heart racing, the sting of betrayal burning beneath the surface, but I swallowed it down. I would not let them see the depth of my hurt. Helen rolled her eyes at me, the movement so exaggerated that it could have been scripted for a bad television show. "That's the only sensible thing you've said all evening," she snapped, her voice dripping with condescension. Every word she spoke felt like a slap across my face, each one digging deeper into the wound they had already inflicted. And then came Claire, her tone dismissive as she added, "You'll cover the cost of the nanny and baby nurse. I'll handle the hiring." Her words were so casual, as if she were discussing the weather, but I could feel the weight of them like a chain around my neck. My breath caught in my throat. A knot of anxiety and disbelief twisted inside me, tightening with each passing second. I was speechless, caught off guard by how easily they had written me off, as if I were nothing more than a financial burden to be managed. But it didn't stop there. Oliver, who had been sitting quietly, observing the exchange with that look of mild detachment, suddenly spoke up. His voice was steady, devoid of any emotion. "You never should have quit that job," he said, his words cutting through the silence. "Our expenses are about to double. You need to keep working." His voice lacked any softness, any empathy. There was no concern for my well-being, no recognition of my sacrifice. It was as if I was nothing more than a cog in their machine, a tool to be used until it no longer served them. That was when the truth hit me like a sucker punch. The realization washed over me in a flood of shame and sorrow. They never wanted me home to rest. They never wanted me to take a break or enjoy the fruits of years of hard work. No, they just needed a steady paycheck flowing into the household, an endless stream of money to support their lavish lifestyle. I was nothing more than a laborer to them, a walking ATM, my value measured only by the income one could generate. I stood tall, forcing myself to hold my ground despite the wave of emotions threatening to swallow me whole. "I'm 60, Oliver," I said, my voice steady but filled with an edge of defiance. "It's time for me to rest. I'm retiring." Claire's laugh cut through the room like a knife, sharp and bitter. "You don't even have a pension. What retirement are you talking about?" The venom in her voice was palpable, and her words hit me with the force of a physical blow. It felt like the air had been knocked out of me. I wanted to argue, to remind her of all the sacrifices I had made, the years of hard work, the times I had put my own needs aside to help them. But I couldn't. Her words lingered, echoing in my mind, and for a moment, I was lost in the suffocating weight of her contempt. I wanted to scream, to let her know how much it hurt. How, years ago, when I had suggested putting money into a retirement plan, they had told me to save instead to help pay off their mortgage early. They had convinced me that it was the responsible thing to do, that we could build a secure future by paying off the house sooner. And now, they were throwing it in my face, using my lack of a pension as ammunition to crush me further. The cruelty of it all was almost too much to bear. How could they have changed so much? How could they look at me, their own mother, with such disdain, with no understanding of the years I had dedicated to their well-being? My sacrifices, my love, my care, it all seemed so insignificant to them now, reduced to a mere financial transaction. But in that moment, as I stood there facing their cold, calculating gazes, I realized something profound. I had spent my life giving and giving, always putting others before myself. But now, at this stage of my life, it was time to take a step back. It was time to put my needs first, to embrace the peace and rest that I had longed for. And no matter how cruel their words were, no matter how they tried to strip away my worth, I knew one thing for certain. I deserved more than this. The words cut deep. "You should have planned better," Claire spat out, her tone icy harsh. "You should have bought a house you could afford without taking out loans. Your income was pathetic." My chest tightened and my stomach churned, but I didn't argue. I couldn't. What was the point? It had all been said before in different ways, in different moments. Each word chipping away at the part of me that still wanted to believe there was love in this family. Somewhere beneath the harsh words and hidden agendas. Ethan, my son, seemed to sense the shift. He always did, always the peacemaker, trying to balance the scales that felt so terribly uneven. He raised his voice in an attempt to cut through the tension. "Enough, Mom. Claire's trying to get pregnant. You're just stressing her out. This is when we really need the money, and you should help. You're in great shape. There's no reason you can't work another 20 years. Another 20 years. The words sank into me like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through my soul. 20 more years. The reality of it hit me like a wave. After everything I had given, everything I had sacrificed, every penny I had scraped together with blood, sweat, and tears, I was still just a means to an end. Nothing but a cash machine to them. My entire existence, reduced to a number on a ledger, a tool to be used and then discarded. I wanted to scream, to ask them how they could be so blind, so cruel. But the words were lost, stuck in my throat, choked by the bitter realization that I had been nothing more than a fool all along. For so long, I had lived in a bubble of hope, hoping that one day, when the burdens were lifted, they would see me, truly see me, for everything I had done. But now I understood the truth. The respect, the gratitude, they had all been nothing but carefully crafted lies, wrapped in sweet words, just to keep me working, to keep me tied down to their whims. The memories hit me hard, each one a stab to the heart. When Oliver went off to college, it was then that I had made the decision. I started dating Claire, partly out of necessity, partly out of a misplaced hope that I could help them. They needed comfort. They needed security. So I moved to another city, away from my friends, my life, everything I'd known, to work as a live-in housekeeper. I did it without hesitation, without a single thought for myself, just so I could save enough money to buy them a house. I still remember the day I handed over the keys to them. The excitement in their eyes, the tears in their voices, the promises they made to me. One day, when we're better off, we'll take care of you, they had said. You'll finally have a life you deserve. Oh, how those words echoed in my mind now. The life you deserve. They said it like they meant it. But now, I understood what they really meant. The life I deserved was one of endless labor, working until my body broke down, until there was nothing left to give. That was the life I deserved. According to them, they would never give me the rest I had hoped for. They had never planned to. The tears that I had held back for so long finally came, slipping down my cheeks. The salt burning against the raw truth. All those years of sacrifice, of losing myself, of giving every ounce of energy, of never thinking about what I wanted, had led me here to this empty place. A place where the promises of the past were nothing but hollow words, spoken by people who never intended to follow through. I had given them everything. My time, my youth, my happiness, my sense of self. And now, they were telling me that it still wasn't enough. That I was still expected to give, to toil, to serve, until I had nothing left. And yet I stayed. Because despite everything, despite the betrayal, I couldn't bring myself to leave. What would I have left? Would they even care? Would they feel any regret for what they had done? No. They would just move on, just like they always had, without a second thought for the woman who had given everything for them. The woman who had once hoped for a life beyond the endless work. A life of peace, of rest, of love. But I had learned now, finally, the cruel reality. And though the betrayal stung like 1,000 sharp knives, I couldn't help but wonder Was there any way to reclaim the life I deserved before it was too late? I stood there, my back straight, feeling the weight of every word I was about to say. It had been building for so long, the frustration, the exhaustion, the quiet indignities I had swallowed. But now, as I looked at Helen and Claire, there was no room left for compromise. I was done. I'm retiring, I said, my voice steady but firm. That's final. No one is going to make that decision for me. Helen's eyes, sharp and calculating as always, softened just slightly. She knew me too well to think that I was bluffing, but she wasn't about to give up easily. Look, we understand, she began, her tone more conciliatory now. But you can't just expect to stay here forever, right? There's no space for you. Her words hung in the air, a reminder of how long I had overstayed my welcome, how much I had been pushed into the shadows of their lives. I had become a fixture in a background, no more important than the worn-out furniture. But I was tired of being invisible, tired of being taken for granted. Helen, ever the pragmatist, leaned forward. I've got a compromise for you. My stomach dropped as she said it, my heart sinking into the pit of my chest. I know a wealthy family looking for a live-in assistant. Good pay room and board. You've done that kind of work before, haven't you? Should be an easy transition for you. Claire, who had been silent until now, let out a dry laugh. She crossed her arms, her lips curling into that all-too-familiar smirk. Perfect, she said. You could help ease our financial burden. Whatever you earn could go toward the household expenses. Win-win, right? Her words felt like a slap, cold and dismissive, a stark reminder of how little I was valued. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, and my chest tightened with rising anger. But I didn't let it spill out. Not yet. I'm done working for others, I said, each word feeling like a declaration of independence. I'm not going back into anyone's house to work again. Helen's smile faltered, then vanished completely. She wasn't used to being rejected. Not by me, not like this. The shift in her expression was almost imperceptible, but it stung. If you're really done, she said, her voice now edged with a thin layer of frustration, then I have another option for you. She paused, watching me, gauging my reaction. There's a senior residence nearby. You could apply for a work-based stay, kitchen help, janitorial services, something to earn your keep. Claire rolled her eyes at the suggestion, clearly unimpressed. That's reasonable, she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. At least you'd be pulling your own weight. Don't expect us to carry you. Each word from them felt like a stone sinking deeper into my chest. They saw me as nothing more than a tool to be used, someone to fill the gaps in their lives, to ease their burdens. They thought they could push me, shove me into one corner or another, and I would simply bend. But they didn't know me anymore. I had spent my life giving, working, sacrificing for others. I had spent too many years in the shadows, too many years being told what I could and couldn't do, who I should and shouldn't be. The idea that they still thought they could dictate my path filled me with a rage that burned hotter than I ever imagined it could. But it wasn't just anger that swelled inside of me. It was something deeper, something quieter, a sense of betrayal. I had once given everything for them, bending over backward to support them, and in return, they had come to expect it. They had come to believe that they were entitled to my service, my presence. And that was where I had reached the breaking point. I'm done, I repeated, my voice now quieter but no less resolute. I'm done being your backup plan. I'm done being the one who's always ready to sacrifice. I'm done. Helen looked at me, her face softening again, but it was different this time. There was no more hope in her eyes that I would simply fall back into line. I don't want your pity, I said, shaking my head, my voice gaining strength as I spoke. I don't want your handouts or your compromises. I've spent too long being the one who's always willing to give, to make do with whatever scraps you throw me. But not anymore. I turned to leave, feeling the weight of their silence pressing down on me. For the first time in a long while, I felt lighter, freer. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their help. I had reached the breaking point, and in that moment, I knew that my life was finally my own. The anger burned in my chest, a furnace of fury that threatened to consume me. But I didn't let it show. I kept my face calm, my hand steady as I turned to look at Oliver. The weight of the moment was suffocating, but I forced myself to speak. You really think it's acceptable to send your own mother off to scrub floors in a retirement facility just to keep myself fed? He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. His voice was low, almost apologetic, but laced with a practicality that felt like a slap in the face. Mom, be realistic. You always said you wanted to be independent. This is the most dignified way to do that. Dignified. The word echoed in my mind, but it didn't make sense. It wasn't dignified to be thrown away like a worn-out tool, left to scrape by in a place where the only job waiting for me was cleaning up after people who didn't care. A hollow pit formed in my stomach, deepening with each passing second. After everything I had done for him, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every single moment of my life dedicated to him, this was how he saw me, as a convenience. Something to be used until it no longer served a purpose. I couldn't breathe. I had poured every ounce of love into him, believing that one day he would understand, that he would see how much I had given. But all I saw now was a stranger who had no room in his heart for the woman who had given him everything. The ache inside me, the betrayal. It threatened to choke me, but I stood tall. From now on, we're done. You and I have nothing to do with each other. The words hung between us like a heavy fog, a reality neither of us wanted to acknowledge, but there was no turning back. I could see the flicker of something in his eyes, a brief moment of regret, maybe, but it was gone as quickly as it came. Without another word, I grabbed my suitcase, the handle cold against my palm, and walked toward the door. My heart beat wildly, each step a painful reminder of what I was leaving behind. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. I had given everything, and now there was nothing left to give. The door creaked open, the sound of finality echoing through the silence. Just as I reached the threshold, Helen's hand shot out, gripping my arm with surprising force. What are you saying? He's your son. You can't just walk away from him. Her voice was frantic, pleading, but I could hear the judgment in it, the disbelief that I would do something so unforgivable. Claire, standing beside her, added her voice to the chorus, her words sharp and accusing. What kind of mother does that? You raised him. Now you're abandoning him. The tears pricked at my eyes, but I swallowed them back, fighting to maintain control. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh. Empty. You don't know the first thing about what it means to love someone. Legally, a parent only has to care for a child until they turn 18. I supported Oliver all the way into his 30s. What more does he expect? But even as I said it, I knew that it wasn't about the law. It was about the heart that I had poured into raising him, into giving him everything I had, only to watch him walk away, to turn his back on me without a second thought. I felt a sharp, biting sting as Oliver spoke again, his words dripping with venom. That's not parenting, Mom. You're just making up for your guilt. The words hit me like a slap, each syllable a sharp cut that tore through the very core of me. Guilt. That was what he thought it was. After all the years of selfless devotion, after all the sacrifices, this was what I had become to him. Nothing more than a shadow of a mother, trying to make up for something I hadn't even done wrong. Every sacrifice, every tear, every moment spent trying to give him a better life, a better future, was it all for nothing? A dull pain spread through me, numbing my thoughts, making everything feel distant and surreal. But I had to hold on. I had to finish this. There was no turning back. Fine, I said, my voice trembling but steady. If I'm so terrible, then you can live with the consequences. My words were final, and as soon as they left my lips, I knew I was severing something irreversible. With that, I walked out the door. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. I had done all I could. I had given him everything, and now it was time for me to walk away. The door closed behind me with a soft click, but it might as well have been a thunderous crash in the silence of my heart. I didn't look back, not once. Not to see if they were watching, not to see if Oliver might regret it. I couldn't afford to hope. Not anymore. I walked away, not knowing where I was going, but sure of one thing. It was better to be alone with my pain than to keep pretending that we were still family. The love I had given had only made me a shadow, and now I was finally free of it.